chat room. I just want to make sure everything is clear. You can hear. Okay, Mirase, appreciate it. Okay. So, first of all, Yerase, we thank everybody for joining in. My name is Odwirafo Kwesi Ranehempata Akan, for those who are unaware. So, what we wanted to do with this short little piece presentation is we're talking about the female divinity Merit, Segert, or Merit, Segare. And let's just blow this image up a little bit. So this is one of the images of her. Let me switch over. Okay. So this is one of the images of the female divinity Merit, Segare, also Merit, Segert, and so forth, and Meret, Segert. Her name is defined as she who loves or desires silence. She has a number of different forms, but one of the things that we talk about with regard to this force in creation, she's one of the many forces that govern creation, called Ntorot and Ntorot in ancient Kemet, misnomer Netoru and Netoru. They are called Orisha in Yoruba. They're called Abosom in the Akan tradition in Ghana, Ivory Coast, in West Afuraka, Afuraitkait, West Africa. These deities are called the Vodou in the Ewe language. But they're the forces of nature, the spiritual forces that animate the sun, moon, earth, mother, oceans, rivers, fire, core of earth, and so forth, the forces that govern all of creation. She is one of those feminine forces. When we are talking about Susuw, the term we utilize for meditation in the Akan language, Merit Segert is essential to the practice of Susuw, essential to the practice of meditation. In our previous presentation, we talked about the etymology of the word meditation. We talked about the Proto-Indo-European root of the term meditation, which is med, which means to measure. That comes from the ancient Kemetic term me, meaning to measure and so forth. In fact, let me pull that up right quick. Okay. Okay. So if you did not see this, previous presentation we did last week, we were talking about Susuw, we were talking about meditation, and we were showing the etymological origin of the term. So you'll see that Susuw, on the right, we have the Akan language from Ghana and Ivory Coast. And of course, Akan people originated in ancient Khanate, the Khan land, ancient Nubia. Some migrated north to settle Kemet, so-called ancient Egypt. Some remained in the south. A couple of thousand years ago, some of us migrated west and reestablished the Akan or Khanate Empire, the Khani Empire, which is the ancient empire of Kana or Ghana in the western part of the continent. of Afuraka, Afuraitkait, the region of today's Mali, parts of Mauritania and so forth. But 1,000 years later, because of Muslim invasions, some of our people migrated from the ancient empire of Ghana, migrated south towards the forest belt, and reestablished Akan or Akana civilization in the forest belt and savanna regions, which is today's Ghana and Ivory Coast, or Cote d'Ivoire. And we reestablished the empire and so forth and continued the civilization. Then a few hundred years after that, some of us were taken from that region and forced into the Western Hemisphere during what we call the Musuo Kessie, the Great Perversity, the enslavement era. And that's how some of us, ended up in North America. So directly from ancient Khanid and Kemet, Nubia and Egypt, to the western part of the continent, then further south in the Forest Belt region, where many of our people are now, and then some of us brought to the Western Hemisphere. So this is why the same language that you find in the Medutu and the hieroglyphs, the language of ancient Kemet, you will find in the Akan language because it's directly descended. The same language, the same religious practices, the same names and functions of deities and so forth, all of that. So we show a comparison in this document. Blow it back up. And you'll see that Susuw, to measure. Let's look at it real quick. To measure, the second part, also to sound, to search or measure the depth of, to calculate the capacity of, also to think, imagine, suppose, presume, to think on, reflect upon, to consider, to meditate. So that notion of measurement, you're measuring yourself, measuring the depth of your spirit and so forth. You're plumbing the depths of your spirit to find out what conditionings or what urges you have. Are they in alignment with divine order, the order of creation, or are they conditionings that need to be unraveled and dissipated? So you measure yourself by reflecting upon the self. That is the nature of Susuw, translated as meditation in English. Then we look at the language of ancient Kemet. You'll see the root term Su, which is simply reduplicated in the Akan language. Su is a measure of length. Su means to measure. Reduplicated in Akan culture, Susuw means to measure. Now, so as you can see here, the etymology of the word meditate, and we give that definition, give the etymological root and so forth, to ponder, think abstractly, engage in mental contemplation, frequentative form of the Proto-Indo-European root med. What does the Proto-Indo-European root med mean? It means to take appropriate measures. So this notion of meditating has to do with taking appropriate measures, to measure. Just like in Akan, the word for meditation or to meditate is Susuw. What is it defined as? To measure, to calculate the depth of, and so forth. So the root of the term meditate in English comes from the Proto-Indo-European root from thousands of years ago, med, meaning to take proper measure. But the Proto-Indo-European quote unquote root, med, is stolen directly from the language of ancient Kemet, which predates the Proto-Indo-European language filing by thousands of years. Med is a corruption of the ancient Kemeti term meh, as we can see here, and it is a measure. It is the royal cubit. The royal cubit is the central unit of measurement for all the temples, tombs, shrines, and everything in ancient Kemet. If you're building roads and tombs and structures and so forth, you have to have a unit of measurement that everything is built upon. Just like you have inches and yards and feet and yards and so forth in English, in Western society, and those are the units of measurement to determine mathematically how everything is going to be established, mechanically, architecturally, engineering-wise, and so forth. In ancient Kemet, the unit of measurement, in English they call it the cubit. In ancient Kemet, it's called meh, the measurement. which became med in Proto-Indo-European and is the root of meditate and everything else. So once again, we're talking about measuring. Now, if you're talking about taking stock of yourself, meditation and so forth, and let me go back out of this, switch back over. Okay. And so we also talked about, for example, this image is of Amenhotep, the son of Hapu, in the common meditative posture, sculpted from ancient Kemet over 3,300 years ago and so forth. We were showing that this is common practice in our ancestral culture. Before we migrated into India thousands of years ago and brought this ritual practice with us, of course, it already existed in our ancestral religious practices, and it continues today. Any Afuraitkait, meaning African ancestral religious practice, Susuw is central to that practice. And that includes those of us who were forced into the Western Hemisphere and continued ancestral religious practices, inclusive of hoodoo, which is the Akan tradition, as we've proven in our films and books, juju in North America, which is the Yoruba tradition, voodoo, which is the Ewe tradition, Mwanga, which is the Ovambo tradition, the Gullah and Geechee traditions, which are the Gola and Kisi traditions from Sierra Leone and so forth, Ngangan tradition, which is the Fang tradition from Cameroon and Gabon. So whatever practice that we brought with us, Susuw, meditation, communication with, the internal self, the divinity that governs the head and so forth, our ancestresses and ancestors, that is accomplished through Susuw. Now let's get to the divinity we're talking about tonight. And Merit, Segert, is that divinity. Now, we talked about how when Europeans are talking, Europeans or Asians are talking about meditation and so forth, pretending like that's something that was developed in the East, which of course it was not. We've been meditating, engaging in Susuw before Europeans or Asians existed on the planet. So, but even when they're talking about that, and then some of our people embrace their methods of meditation and ritual practice and so forth, and take classes and certifications and so forth with them, and they talk about meditation, one thing they will not talk about because they don't know about it. Merit, Segert is central to meditation. There is no meditation without this divinity. And we're going to show you exactly why she is central to meditation. If you don't know who she is, then you don't know what meditation is and what it accomplishes. We always invoke this divinity, some of us by name and so forth, or some of us through the ritual practice. Even if we don't invoke her by name, we're invoking her through the ritual practice. Dealing with her shrines within our physical bodies and invoking her energy in the world and so forth. So let's look at her name, her function, her place in cosmology and so forth, her place biologically, and then you'll see why we're talking about she is central to meditation. There is no meditation without her. Now, okay, so I want to make sure you can see this doc. Okay, so this is one of the documents in one of our courses, the Ntorot to Seneb, the biospirituality of the goddesses. part 1 and part 2, but in part 1, we went into detail about the cosmology of Merit Segert. Name is spelled different ways, Merit or Meret, Segert or Segert, and so forth. And we show her different forms here. Sometimes she takes the form of a woman and so forth. Sometimes with the sacred animal totem of the cobra, the female cobra, serpent, divinity, and so forth. Sometimes the body of a woman, the head of a cobra. Sometimes, the cobra itself. So these are the different forms. This imagery here is the mountain, the sacred shrine in Kemet of Merit Segert. So in this form right here, she's in the form of the animal totem, her sacred animal totem, the sacred cobra, and so forth. Now, so first we will look at her name. So the name Mer Segert or Merit Segert or Merit Segert and so forth. In the language of ancient Kanini Kemet, the term Mer, which is also Meh in Coptic, Mer in the ancient dialect, and it's also Meh in Akan, Peh or Meh in Akan. It means to love or desire. And then Segert or Segert is composed of two terms. So if you look at the term ger, to be still, silent. Ger, ro, silent mouth is a derivation of that. Ro, they have here a rap, it's ro, aro, meaning mouth. Ger, ro, mouth, or silent, mouth and so forth, meaning being quiet and so forth. But ger means to be still, to be silent. Segeru, the silent ones. Segert, silence, stillness. Segert as a title, the city of silence or stillness. The term mer means to love or desire. So when they define Mert Segarit, the Mert Segert, as she who loves silence, she who loves stillness, that's a direct translation of her name. Now, we also show in the Akan language, so ger, which in Coptic becomes, let me just show that real quick. When you see in this particular dictionary, Copt, C-O-P-T, is the Coptic dialect, the late period dialect of the language of ancient Kemet, the last surviving expression of the language that came into use about 2,000 years ago. You'll see that ger, kar, god, or kar, and so forth. So dialectical differences. So we showed that because kar, or god, or gara, you have kra, or krana, in Akan, meaning silent, absolutely still, perfectly quiet, and so forth. So kara, which became karana or krana, comes from gara, which became garana or karana. In ancient Kemet, it's gar or gara. In Akan, it's kara or krana, which means silent. And we just showed the relationship between the two. That we still have an etymological relationship in the language of Kemet, in the Akan language as well. So, silent to silence, she takes the form of the sacred fire-spitting cobra. Now, let's get into the cosmology, very important. Here you have the Western Mountain Peak, and you also have a pyramid just to show the relationship. The Western Mountain in Kemet is the land of the setting sun. So you have an eastern mountain range where the sun rises between two mountains on the horizon in the east. And when the sun sets in the west, it sets in the western mountain range and it goes down and it appears to penetrate the mountains and go into the underworld. So when the sun is setting, it's setting amongst this mountain range, and there's a great peak, the Western Mountain Peak, the Dehent Amentet, or the Peak of the West. This is the sacred mountain of Merit Segert. They'll say the sacred female divinity, that sacred serpent power resides in this region of the earth. And that sacred mountain peak is akin to a mer or a pyramid. The term for pyramid in ancient Kemet is mer, or merkut. So, but that sacred peak, you know, is similar to, in fact, the pyramids were made in the image of the sacred mountains. And when you're driving through ancient Khanit, Nubia, and southern Kemet, and you see these, you know, mountains and so forth, they are literally structured in their natural formations like pyramids. You can't tell the difference between, is this an actual created structure, a pyramid, or is this a naturally occurring mountainous form? When you're driving through Nubia, like when we take, you know, trips to Kemet and so forth, you'll see many, many hundreds of these naturally occurring formations that look exactly like pyramids, and the pyramids were structured after these forms. But this is her sacred mountain peak. When you go to the so-called Valley of the Kings and so forth, and you're walking towards the Valley of the Kings where the kings are buried and so forth, and the tombs and underground and so forth, when you're walking in that direction, you will see the great mountainous peak, Dehent Amentet, the sacred shrine space of this female divinity. And when you go in that region, you feel the energy of Merit Segert. In fact, let's show this. I'm going to show this. I'll show you a quick little video. Okay, and this is real quick, but when we were on the last tour to Kemet that we took, when we went into the Valley of the Kings, you'll see that we're walking towards that great mountain. So that's in Sakara, that's in the north, but that's in the south in Afuraka, so-called Filai. And this right here, we're walking towards the Valley of the Kings, and this is the Dehent Amentet. That is the sacred sanctuary of that divinity. Now, I want to show why that's so important. In the cosmology of ancient Kemet, you see that the female divinity, Nut, who governs the atmosphere, she's bent over the earth and so forth. Her womb is in the east, so they say she gives birth to the sun in the daytime. So her womb is, so she's a great female divinity stretched over the earth. Just like you look up in the sky at nighttime, you see the darkness of the sky, you know, the canopy of the sky bent over earth and so forth. She is the spiritual force inside the atmosphere and so forth, animating the atmosphere. Her womb gives birth to the sun in the east, and then you'll see that she swallows the sun in the west. So she swallows the sun in the west, and the sun goes down into the underworld, goes under the western horizon, so to speak, and goes into the underworld for 12 hours of the night, and then is reborn in the east. So her womb is in the east. She's bent over the earth and so forth. Her nose and mouth is in the west. She gives birth to the sun in the east. The sun sets, and she swallows the sun in the west. Now, let's look at what they have to say about that aspect of the cosmology, and we're going to prove biologically who she is, why she governs silence, why she's directly related to meditation. All right. Now, when you read information about this divinity, they'll have the basic information talking about her name and so forth, just general information. And then they get into a portion of the cosmology. Now, so as you can see here, it says, Segert was especially associated with the hill now called El Kurn, meaning the horn, in ancient Kemet. Dahent, the peak, is a natural peak, the highest point in the Theban hills, which dramatically overlooks the Valley of the Kings. It has almost a pyramidal shape when viewed from the entrance to the Valley of the Kings, and we just saw that. Now, if you hear something in the background, they're already, some of our people are already doing this Juneteenth fireworks nonsense already. So they'll say El Korn, or the Dahent Amentet, also believed to be one of the entrances to the Duat, the underworld, was sacred to both Merit Segert and Heteru. But the former, Merit Segert, was considered its real personification. In other words, that is her shrine. That is her physical shrine. Her spirit takes up residence in that space on Earth. The Western horizon, basically the gateway to the underworld. So, for this reason, two of Merit Segert's many epithets were Peak of the West, Dahent Amentet, as well as Lady of the Peak. Many small stelae created by artisans and workers have been found as evidence of devotion to their favorite deities, in addition to Merit Segert and so forth, and they talk about the different divinities. And we're going to check out this stele of Nefer Abu in a second, but so that is the piece. Now, she's a serpent divinity. We're going to look at the forms once again, and then we're going to prove it. Okay. So now we know she's sacred serpent animal totem, Achinebwa, or animal totem, the cobra and so forth, the hooded cobra. As you can see here, her body's in the form of a cobra. And sometimes the cobra itself. The peak of the West is the land of the setting sun, the gateway to the underworld, the Duat, the ancestral realm, and so forth. And she's also Merit Segarit, she who loves, Merit Segert, silence. Now, when you put all of those together, we don't only have her shrine space on Earth, we can prove what her shrine space in the body is. If you look at the shrine space on Earth, the gateway to the underworld, when the sun is in the sky and it sets in the west, it goes down deep and then it disappears into the underworld. And she's right there at the gate. So, what is our underworld? When you consume food and you take it in, it goes through the esophagus and goes internally into the deep darkness in the underworld, and it begins to make its movement through the digestive system, generating a great deal of energy so you can operate. So consumption, you swallow the food, It goes into the darkness of the underworld and goes down into the underworld. We showed the goddess Nut bent over the sky, in the sky, and so forth. And her womb is near the eastern horizon, and the spirit, as she's bent over the entire earth and so forth, her mouth and nose are in the western horizon. And she's swallowing the sun, and it goes into the underworld. So for us, our digestive system begins when we swallow food and so forth, goes into the esophagus and goes into the underworld, same spot. But right before you swallow the food, what is the space and the organ right there? This image that we put forward right here, this looks like a hooded cobra. This is actually the epiglottis. This is the organ from the front and the side view of the epiglottis. It is in the shape, it's shaped and it looks like a cobra. So what is the epiglottis? Okay, so let's switch. Okay. So the epiglottis is a leaf-shaped flap in the throat that prevents food and water from entering the trachea and the lungs. It stays open during breathing, allowing air into the larynx. During swallowing, it closes to prevent aspiration of food into the lungs, forcing the swallowed liquids of food to go along the esophagus toward the stomach instead. It is thus the valve that diverts passage to either the trachea or the esophagus. The epiglottis is made of elastic cartilage covered with a mucous membrane and so forth. Attached to the entrance of the larynx, it projects upwards and backwards behind the tongue and hyoid bone. So, the epiglottis is shaped in the form, and it's at the top here. And in fact, let's go back to our other document right quick. Now we have the epiglottis from the side view and the front view. This is the side view, front view. From the side view and the front view, it's in the form of a hooded cobra. So there's a cobra. If you look at it, when you open your mouth and look back, just like a doctor with a, light and so forth to show, this is the curved flap from the, front view and so forth. So there's a quote unquote hooded cobra right at the gateway to the underworld. The hooded cobra determines what direction the food is going to go. It blocks off the trachea so food doesn't go into the trachea, and it makes sure the food goes to the right place, goes to the underworld, goes into the esophagus so you can be nourished and energized and so forth. There's a serpent power that sits right at the gateway of the underworld. That serpent power, so that's literally just like on Earth, she's the spiritual force operating through that great peak, the peak of the West, the peak of the gateway to the underworld. Here's the serpent power. She's right at the peak. She's at the gateway to the underworld and so forth. She makes sure, as we're going to read in the text, she protects the trachea to make sure food doesn't go down the, the windpipe and so forth, so you don't choke and so forth. She directs the entities to the proper pathway, to their proper path, just like she directs us to our proper path in life. Now, the other part, Merit, Segert, if you say, hold the tone, you say, ah, and you cut it off, it is the epiglottis that covers, the windpipe and so forth, that silences you. So she is the one Mer, who loves. Segert, silence. Gert means silence or stillness. Segert, se or sa, is a causative in the language of ancient Kemet. So sa or se means to cause something to happen. So gert means silence or stillness. Segert or sagert means to cause something to become silent or still. So merit, segarit, or merit, sagert. She loves silence, but she loves to cause silence or stillness. It is her sacred cobra form sitting at the gateway of your underworld that causes silence. She shuts off silence. She shuts off the sound coming from the windpipe. And anytime you ever said, ah, and cut off your flow of air and so forth, and cut off the sound, you were utilizing or invoking the energy or the force of the epiglottis, the sacred cobra, to cut off sound. Now that's her physical shrine in your body. The spiritual force that takes up residence in that physical shrine has the same function in your spirit body as she has in the physical body. She's the one that you invoke to silence or still negative individuals or entities or projections or conditionings that are flooding your conscious awareness and so forth, that would otherwise cause you to latch onto them and engage in behaviors that are self-destructive, disordered, and so forth. When you engage in the meditative process, you seek to silence yourself and still yourself, we begin an invocation of Merit, Segarit. We invoke that divinity, and just like physically, she silences the sound, ah, and cuts it off. When we invoke that divinity, she's the one who silences all the thoughts that are coming in and out, so that once you can silence those thoughts and projections, as well as projections from other individuals who project things spiritually, mentally, energetically, and so forth, she silences that, protects you from that, and then you can go internal and measure the depths of your spirit, calculate the depth of your spirit, calculate the depth of your thoughts, intentions that will develop into actions and so forth. Measure them, Susuw, measure yourself, your thoughts, intentions, and actions against the standard of divine order. If they don't measure up to divine order, then you make a change. So when we invoke Merit Segarit, she is the key to silencing negative or misguided or discordant or disordered thoughts that will affect your intentions. Without her, there is no silence. Physically, she's the one who cuts off the air from the windpipe, so she physically is the one who stops sound. You can't stop sound without her. Spiritually, she's also the one that loves silence, Merit Segarit. She silences those thoughts, intentions that lead to actions that could be disruptive. So we've always invoked her. Let's look at a prayer to this divinity by Nefer Abu and see what he has to say about this force in creation. She's a female divinity. She's a serpent divinity, meaning she has that animal totem of the serpent. Just like you can see someone who's a falconer and so forth. They can have a falcon on the arm. They train them. They send them out. The falcon goes out and flies and captures something and brings it back and so forth. You can train. We train lions, lionesses, dogs and cats and so forth. We did the same thing with serpents, same thing with crocodiles and so forth. Baboons, these are our animal totems, and they're associated with specific divinities because they carry the energy complex of that specific divinity. So she's that serpent power, fire-spitting serpent, fire-spitting cobra. That venom can kill the enemy, but she's also a divine healer. So let's look at what the cosmology has to say about her. So this is the stele of Nefer Abu that was mentioned on Wikipedia and so forth. And we're going to read that translation. This is it. So what did he have to say about her? And at first, they'll say, it was believed that she punished the workers who committed sacrilege, like people stealing something from royal graves or the building sites, those kinds of things, poisoning them with her bite. But she also was considered generous in forgiving those who repented to her, not forgiving, but those who realigned themselves with order and so forth. And they talk about heal this individual from physical evil. This is the case of the draftsman Nefer Abu, who would have been cured of blindness after having begged Merit Segert, as he himself was able to attest on a limestone stela. So he was cured of blindness by invoking her and so forth, and he commemorated that with this prayer on this ritual stela. Hold on a second. Okay. Hold on 1 second. Let me make sure we're okay. Okay, so this is an invocation. So the translation is giving praise to the peak of the west, meaning Dehent Amentet, that is a praise name for Merit Segari, kissing the ground to her Ka'et, or her Ka, her soul divine consciousness. I give praise. Hear my call. I was a truthful man on earth, made by the servant of the place of truth, Nefer Abu Ma'akeru. I was an ignorant man and foolish who knew not good from evil. I did the transgression against the peak, against Dehent, against her and so forth, and she taught a lesson to me. I was in her hand by night and by day. I sat on bricks like the woman on labor. I called to the wind, it came not to me. And he says he sat on bricks like the woman in labor. Of course, they are birthing bricks. Just like today, people are beginning to use, they're going back to ancient practices and beginning to use birthing stools. When you go to a holistic birth and so forth, people have doulas and midwives and they use a birthing stool. So they sit on the stool and give birth, and the practice of catching babies and so forth in the Hoodoo tradition is based on that. The notion of laying down in the bed and, giving birth that way, that was a rather recent practice, European practice, but the sitting on birthing bricks or birthing stool is ancient. And now people are going back to these ancient practices. But this is a euphemism for, he's saying, I was sitting on bricks. He was suffering. He was in pain, just like a woman in labor. He was in pain. He was suffering. He made a transgression. He didn't know good from evil. He made a transgression against the divinity. He operated out of harmony with divine order, created disorder in the world and in his life. So he transgressed against the divinity. Now, so he said, I called to the wind, it came not to me. I libated to the peak of the west, Merit Segert, great of strength, and to every Ntorot and Ntorot, every god and goddess. Behold, I will say to the great and small who are in the truth, beware of the peak, beware of Dehent, beware of Merit, for there is a lion within her. The peak strikes with the stroke of a savage lion. She is after him who offends her. I called upon my mistress, meaning my masteress, which is the peak, an honorific title. I found her coming to me as a sweet breeze. She was merciful to me, having made me see her hand. She returned to me appeased. She made my malady forgotten. For the peak of the west, the Amentet is appeased, if one calls on her. So says Nefer Abu Ma'akeru, or justified. He says, behold, let hear every ear that lives upon earth. Beware of the peak of the west. Beware of the Amentet. Beware of Merit Segari. So he's just recounting the story of how he transgressed against her. He became blind. He invoked the divinity. She searches out his spirit. He realigns himself with that force in creation, which means he realigns himself with divine order in thought, intention, and action. And once he realigns with the divinity, then what she does is she restores him, and he says the malady was forgotten. They're talking about the body and so forth. And he came back into wholeness, physical soundness and spiritual soundness. And then he warns people, if you transgress against the divinity, then you're going to suffer the consequences. That's true of any force in creation. If you go against nature, you're going to suffer. If you try to consume things that are not in harmony with the way you're structured, you're going to poison yourself. If you go against creation, you're going to put yourself out of harmony with creation and you're going to suffer. So now, when we're talking about her being a healeress as well as a killer and so forth, this is the same practice when we talk about the hoodoo tradition of voodoo or juju or wanga and so forth. We have medicines that heal, but we also have herbs and so forth that can be utilized to poison or kill the enemy. She's a divine healeress, but she also punishes. You have a pain center in your body. It's not about sadistic notions and so forth. The pain center is there to alarm you that something is out of order, meaning you need to get back in harmony with order. You're transgressing the order of your physical makeup. So the pain center is activated to show you you need to get back in alignment. And once that pain is affected, then there's a healing effect that can happen. Your immune system, lymphatic system can kill cancerous cells or other viral agents and so forth, but your other systems will bring a healing effect as well. So when they talk about her as a healeress, but also a killer, this is what we're talking about. That force in creation, she can assist you in guiding you to the proper path. Just like the epiglottis guides the food to the proper path. Should it go in the trachea? That would create disorder. No, if you're going to the underworld, you need to go to the proper lane so you can go to the proper path so the food can be regenerative and rejuvenating. When we transition and our spirits leave the body and we go into the ancestral realm, you can go to the path of those ancestral spirits who are self-destructive and are still spiritually discordant, or you can follow, when you invoke the divinity Merit Segert, she will direct you to the proper path to the community of ancestresses and ancestors who live harmoniously. And you can have a harmonious existence as an ancestor or an ancestress until it's time for you to reincarnate a couple hundred years later through your blood circle. She guides that process. She also guides that process not only after death, but when we engage the spirit realm. As soon as you begin to meditate, you stop focusing externally and you focus internally. You go into the spirit realm and she guides you to the proper place. You invoke the divinity, the peak of the west, the one who is the gateway to the spirit realm, and she will guide you towards the right place so you don't fall into negative conditionings, old conditionings based on trauma and so forth, and then your behavior is governed by that. You don't fall into being whipped up by the projections of other people who are either doing it deliberately, projecting negative energy towards you, or thoughts and intentions and so forth, or if they're doing it unconsciously because they're so wound up in their own trauma that they're constantly emitting negative energetic vibrations and messages and everything else. She guides you away from that, whether it's coming from external from other individuals or the conditionings that you've programmed within yourself or other people have inculcated within you, that if you operated based on those conditionings, you would be self-destructive. She guides you away from those external and internal negative structures and guides you to the proper path. So when you go into the spirit realm, the quote unquote underworld, she is at the gate. When you invoke Merit Segert, first you become silent. She can assist you and direct you to silence these other projections so you can be focused and so forth. And you can go into the spirit realm, grab what you need from the wealth of knowledge and wisdom from your ancestresses and ancestors. So when you come out of that spiritual space, you can operate in the world and correct things that have been, disordered and so forth, and build upon things that you need to build upon. She is central to the physical silencing of sound emitting from you, but also the silencing of negative energetic projections and conditionings. So that's the information I want to share on Merit, Segert. We also, hold on a second. And of course, if you have any questions in the chat room, you can post them. So, and part of this reason we put this information out is we have our upcoming meditation instructor certification course, certifying people in the practice, not only the practice of meditation, but so that you can be an instructor in meditation. You're certified and you can go to different organizations or places of employment, agencies, or people invite people out and they want to, pay someone to come out and conduct meditation sessions on a periodic basis, whether it's daily or weekly or monthly or special events. And many organizations, many agencies, many places of employment, many schools, whether it's home schools, charter schools, even regular schools and so forth, they're starting to incorporate meditation to help people become focused, overcome, discipline problems and so forth, focused at work, focused at school, people with their health issues, even places that are dealing with holistic health. If you went to a women's organization and they may bring somebody in one day to teach about breastfeeding, they may bring another person in to talk about weight loss, they may bring another person in another day to talk about meditation and focus and overcoming anxiety, overcoming depression, being refocused for sound and grounded relationships with family, significant others, and so forth, even employment and so forth, confidence building, overcoming, fear and anxiety, all these different things. So once you're certified, then you can use that certification, go to different places, organizations, or, rent out a space for 2 hours, community center, tell people you're going to have a meditation session. You can charge a small fee or do it whatever way you want to do it, ask for donations, whatever way you would like to do that. And this is a way for you to be entrepreneurial, but positively impact our community at the same time. So we are, that class begins June 18th, which is next Tuesday. And we did a live last Friday. It is on our YouTube page here, channel here. So if you look at that live, it's about an hour, a little bit over an hour, and we overview what the course is about. And we go into some detail about how we're approaching the course and what you are to expect and so forth. So that's a good primer for what's going to happen in the course. The course is a 4-week course, June 18th, every Tuesday, June 18th through July 9th at 8 p.m. So you can register today. All the information is on the Susuw page on the website. Okay, so I want to, if you have any questions, of course, you can post them in the chat room. I just want to check and see. So you said, question, I hear you mention many deities and their connection to proper judgment, insight, and meditation, but I haven't heard you mention Awusi. Isn't he also connected in some ways? Yes, so Awusi is the divinity that governs, which is all Sar in ancient Khmer, Awusi and Akan, or Batala in Yoruba, Dangbe and Vodun and so forth. Igbo, hold on. In the Igbo tradition, he's Agwu-Isi. So, yes, he's a divinity that he governs regulatory order in creation, establishes regulatory order. That includes judgment. He also has to do with spirit possession, divination in general, the practice of divination and so forth. He's the quote unquote head of the divinities in that context. So if you look at the book, let's switch over real quick. Okay, so on the publications page on our website, and this is for individuals who are unaware also. Hold on a second. Okay, so on the Nkwamua page, the publications page on our website, you will see all of the 31 books that I've published. I published 31 books to date. I'll be publishing and releasing some more books this year, this summer, as a matter of fact. But so far, the 31 books I've written and published to date are on the website. The ebook versions are free downloads, from the website. So one of them is the Akradin Bosom Series Volume 2, which deals with Awusi and Adwa, which is our Sar and our Set, Awusi and Adwa and Akan. And you will see, so this is our Sar, Awusi and Akan, our Set, Adwa and Akan, and so forth. In that book, we go into detail about the nature and function of Awusi al-Sar and his, role with regard to judgment and divination and, spirit communication and spirit possession and so forth. Okay, the other question is, so does this mean that naturally introverted people who do not like a lot of talking and extroverted interactions are in some ways connected to Merit Segert? Some people are, but some people, it depends on the divinity that governs you. That's the primary influence in your life is the divinity that governs your head in connection with your matriclan and patriclan divinities. So, just like in order for you to exist, your parents contributed, the father contributed the sperm cell with Y chromosomal DNA, your mother contributed the mitochondrial DNA in the ovum cell and so forth. But the spiritual force that animated the sperm cell is the patriclan divinity, which we call the Etja bosom in Akan, or the Ntorot bosom. The spiritual force that animated the ovum is the matriclan divinity, the female divinity, that we call the Abusia bosom, or the Nton bosom in Akan, and so forth. So just like your physical DNA, Y chromosomal and mitochondrial, combine from the mother and father and create a unique physiological being, which is you, the energy of the patriclan divinity that animated the sperm cell blends with the energy of the matriclan divinity that animated the ovum cell. The union of the patriclan and matriclan divinity's energy creates a unique energy configuration which defines your spirit body, but is governed by the deity that governs your head. So the deity that governs your head, like the spirit's brain and so forth, in concert with that unique configuration of masculine and feminine or paternal and maternal energy, those three, the deity that governs your head and the matriclan and patriclan divinities, they're the major influence on the way you operate, the way you function, just like you're physiologically, the way you look, your phenotype, your morphology and so forth is coming from the mother's and the father's side. Your eyebrows, your eyes, your shape of your head, your body structure and so forth. You can look at the matriclan and patriclan side and see where it came from. Your temperament, your energetic complex, the way you operate in the world, what you're inclined towards, what you're disinclined from, and so forth. That is a function primarily of the deity that governs your head as conditioned and nuanced by that unique energy of the matriclan and patriclan spirits. So that's the major piece. But some people have a direct, strong relationship with Merit Segert because of their function in the world and who they are in the community, what kind of energy they need to wield in the community. So they have more of a direct, powerful relationship with her than other individuals. Okay. So any other questions about this information we went over, or any questions about the upcoming course? Somebody asked a question about so we have a payment. The payment options, you can pay the full fee up front is $399, basically $99 a week for 4 weeks for the certification. That includes the books that we will go over. Some of the 31 books that I've published are books that we will be examining in detail in the course. Of course, those books are free. And then, of course, you receive a certificate at the end, and that's the certificate that becomes your credential that you can utilize in different, business settings or community events. If somebody has a cultural event, they want somebody to come out, and sometimes they have people come out and pour libation. Sometimes they'll have people come out, hey, can you conduct this Susuw, ritual practice for us? So before we have this conference or before we have this, event, we want to get on the same page spiritually. So they'll call people out. They may pay you $100 or $200 to, conduct that session, but this is your credential. Some places don't ask for a certification if they know you or have some relationship, or you, by word of mouth, people know who you are and so forth. They'll say, well, just come on in and we'll pay you by invoice, or they'll pay you cash or cash app you or whatever. But many places, if they don't know who you are and they have funding sources, they have money set aside for these kinds of things. It has become very popular because of mindfulness and things like that, and because of the scientific studies that show that meditation decreases anxiety and depression and things like that, and helps children as young as, elementary school as well as through high school and college, assist them to be focused. Even 5 or 10 minutes of meditating right before school after the first bell. They have children meditating. They notice that throughout the day they are more focused, more disciplined, more amenable to, following direction and so forth. So many schools across the country have implemented these things and so forth. So they have funding sources. They have money set aside already. Schools, after school programs, as we said before, certain agencies of human services. So if people are in shelters or mental health programs or, drug prevention programs or addiction programs or, breastfeeding programs for mothers and different programs for mothers and children and so forth, shelters, all these different kinds of things. Even in hospitals, they have somebody come, they contract you out. Can you come to this group that we have a treatment plan group once a week on Thursdays, and the social worker, case manager, therapist, and some of the clients all sit together. They, discuss different things. We want to do a short meditation session before we get into our, group therapy session. Very often they do that. They have things set aside. But in those kinds of situations, very often, even though they have the money set aside, since they have to answer to their funding sources, they just want to know if you have a credential. So if you have a certificate, that's enough to say, okay, we have a credentialed individual and we're writing this check out and we're, honoring this invoice for this individual. And that's enough to satisfy their funding sources so they can, pay. And that's one of the reasons we're doing this, because, people have asked us about certifications for years and we never had a certification process. We just let other people who have done that over the decades, do that. But people have asked on a regular basis. And what ends up happening is people go to other organizations where they certify them, but they're teaching information that's partially accurate, but a lot of misinformation. And they have to sit through that and pay for that just so they can get this credential so they can go and do the work they want to do. So we decided to put this, certification course together for the community so you can impact the community while you're engaged in entrepreneurial endeavors. You can positively impact youth as well as adults and get paid for doing so. And it's a win-win situation across the board. So, okay. All right, so there are no other questions. Let me just, so in the description for the video, you will see Susuw is the page. So it's odwirafo.com/susuw.html. So you'll see that link in the description for this video and so forth. And that's the link to the meditation course, instructor certification course. You can also share this with other individuals as well. If you are a member of our Patreon group, we have a Patreon group, patreon.com/HoodooCast. So we have our Hoodoo podcast, the HoodooCast podcast, and we have a Patreon group with that, associated with that. If you're a member of the group, then you get a 25% discount on this course. Just like any course that we have and anything that we have with the Patreon group, people get the information, for example, our 40 online courses. And let me switch over to that real quick, just so you can see what I'm talking about. Okay. Okay, so you see this Akan page on our website. This is our institution page. This image here is a collage with the flyers from all of the 40 online courses that we have in our archives and so forth. And when you scroll down, you'll see the original flyers for each course. So we've taught 40 online courses in our institution. And just like we had, some of them were 4-week courses, some of them were 6-week courses, some of them were 7-week courses and so forth. So all of them exist as archives now. You can purchase them for a 50% discount and so forth, one by one if you like to. For example, this 7-week course here, the 7 Spirits of Ra. So 7-week course that you can access that, and you can go through that 7-week course at your own pace. But all 40 courses are on our Patreon group. So people who are members of the Patreon group, it's a $7.77 per month. You have access to our documentary films. You have access, of course, to all of the podcast episodes, plus any exclusive content. But you also have access to all 40 of our online courses. Most of our online courses are either $10 or $15, $15 for the 6-week courses, $10 for the 4-week courses, and so forth. So you can get them individually, but if you're a member of Patreon, you can access all 40 of them, indefinitely and so forth, just for the $7.77 per month. That's just a perk of being in the Patreon group. Access to our documentary films, but also we just added this certification course, so you get a 25% discount. So instead of $3.99, it's $2.99 and so forth for the course if you're part of the Patreon group. So okay, question. So it says, may I say for your presence and information, brother, if we are unable to make this session course, when will it be offered again? So we are going to post soon. We have to figure out some dates for the next time that we host it, but this one is June 18th through July 9th. We may do it again at the end of the summer. We haven't figured that schedule out yet, but once we go through this one, we'll be able to figure out some dates. Also, this course will also be archived as well. So if you're not able to, attend live, if you want to, you can register and you'll have access, just like the people who register and attend live, they will also have access to the recordings with a, a private link, so they can review it whenever they want to indefinitely. It'll be posted up, on that specific link site, secure site, and so forth, so they can always have access to the videos and review them at any time. So if you wanted to register and you're not able to attend live, you will, you can still access the, archived, pieces. And then, of course, as somebody who's certified, of course, you go through the course, you have access to the archives. You can always review them, but you can also reach out to us if you have any questions about something you didn't understand or you need some more clarity on, and so forth. So, and in fact, I'm going to make a post about that, because most people know that when we have a course, the archives are made available after the course is complete. But a lot of people may not be aware that they can, if they can't do this course live, they can get the archives, so they won't have to wait, months until the next time we do it. You can access it, still. So I'll do a post about that so I can clarify that so people can, be aware. Okay, so there are no more questions. We'll go ahead and end it here. Of course, if you have any questions, we're going to post this up. Of course, people will be able to access this. We'll keep this up on YouTube. But if you have any questions, just hit us up on Instagram or email us, or, reach out to us. And please share the information. There are people who are looking for something entrepreneurial that they would like to engage in. It's a 4-week course, and they can utilize that to, generate income for themselves, but also impact our community, youth as well as adults, in a positive capacity. We have done this. We've been doing meditation or Susuw for 30 years, but as far as teaching, it's been 20. Prior to becoming an entrepreneur, I was working in the field of mental health, so with youth as well as adults, drug prevention in Chicago, with youth and so forth, from elementary school all the way through high school. In Washington, D.C., with youth and therapeutic foster care, as well as adults in the mental health field and so forth. So all of these things that we're teaching are things that we've utilized in the field of mental health, but just in the community in general, from youth as well as adults. They were effective in the methods that we are teaching. Even the Nkwamua Whole Life Journal came out of that experience. We published that book based on these experiences over the past 20 years and so forth. So this is why we, know it's effective. So, okay. Okay, so once again, Yerase, we thank everybody for tuning in, and Yebesha Bio, we will meet again.